Well, good afternoon and welcome back to another live iThemes training event. My name is Nathan Ingram. I'm the host here at iThemes Training, and we're joined today by our very special guest, Mark Tilley. Mark is the CEO of Target Info, and he's the developer of the My Curator content curation plugin for WordPress. And Mark, thanks for being with us, and tell us a little bit about content curation.
Okay. Well, thank you, Nathan. Thank you for having me. For all of you out there, this will be my first webinar, so bear with me if I get confused or mixed up. I've been giving this presentation at WordCamps around the country, and have been in, as Nathan said, content curation for, I'd say, since 2011 when I first started my plugin, My Curator. Before that, I've been in software for a long time, doing assembly code to build printer device drivers for early PCs to big mainframes to our software company that we grew and went public with. So I'm pleased to be here today, and what I want to do is answer this question. I'm so busy with my business, how can I get content on my site? You know, what we're going to try and do is go through a set of simple steps that's going to bring content curation as a starting point, but a way to really build a process and a capability to start writing on your own. This is probably how most of you feel running your business. I know I did. I have all through my life. Running a business is a heck of a lot of fun, but it never stops. And you know, whether you're building sites for clients or you're building sites for yourself, you know, it's crazy. And to try and think that you're going to sit down and write some articles and build content just doesn't happen. Some of the, you know, used to be back in the older days, you could pay people to do SEO. You still can, but they could do things like link farms. They could do keyword stuffing. Remember those days where you could stuff keywords all over your site, make them the background color, and they'd be, you know, found by Google, but no one else. You could auto-generate content, all these other, what they used to call black hat techniques. Unfortunately, Google's put an end to that. Really the best way, almost the only way to really get your site found these days is content marketing. Having information on your site that people want to read. But as you know, that's a lot of time and effort. But if you don't find a way to do it, your site may end up like this. I can't tell you how many of my clients end up coming to me and this is what their blog looks like. You know, maybe it's been 6 months, it still looks like this. You know, you're just too busy. If you're just looking for a website, if your client is just looking for a website that is just a business page, you know, a business card on the web, it's got a few pages about your business, and the only way you get found is by, you know, handing out a business card physically, you know, well, then this is probably okay. But most people want their website to do something for them. They want to get found. This is where you want to be, a site like one of these, where content is king. You know, a showcase site. Wouldn't that be great, where you just got all this content and all this pretty pictures and videos, blah, blah, blah. It's just hard to get there. You know, why does that work? Well, I like to think of Google. You know, Google is going to be ranking your site based on search engine questions. Well, Google's getting pretty smart. You know, it's almost like a person these days. And the best way to think about it is when people search, they're asking a question. And what Google's trying to do is say, what site out there is going to answer this question the best? I mean, what's the best site out there to answer this question? You know, it's not just any more, you know, links and page links and stuff like that. Google's really trying to figure out how to answer that question now. And the content on your site is going to decide for Google how well you answer their question. Give a quick example. Let's say you're a tax lawyer in city, you know, Atlanta. There's probably hundreds of them. And they all got a nice site that says, here's my tax law. You know, I do tax law, I do real estate tax law, I do federal tax, whatever, blah, 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 blah. You know, everyone's got a site like that. But guess what? If you have a site with a bunch of articles about tax law, say I've got articles about real estate tax law, about special local tax law in Atlanta, about, you know, special state taxes. If I've got a bunch of articles there, then all of a sudden Google's going to say, someone's asking about tax law in Atlanta, but this site has a lot of information. Maybe I'll send them there as one of the top sites to go to. So that's why content is king, and that's how, that's what you want to do. So how are we going to get there? Well, content curation is a great way to get started building content for your site. Notice I said get started, because it's really not the be all and end all. You really are going to have to go beyond that to get a highly ranked site. But there's two things about content curation that are really a great place to start. First of all, you're attending to your site. Even if you're just curating some simple articles with a little bit of explanation, something's happening on your site, and that's a good thing. Even if it's just simple curations, as we'll see later, it's a great thing that you're starting to attend to your site and getting some content up there. The second thing is, as you write and build content, well, guess what? Those paragraphs might become 2 paragraphs. You might start writing a little more about a certain article that really piques your interest. So you're starting to build your own skills. And that's where I think content curation can really lead you to a much more higher ranked site. So what is content curation? I noticed Nathan asked earlier how many people heard about it. Some have, some haven't. Some want to know the details. The first thing is, content curation is not content aggregation. Content aggregation is just gathering up everything you can find and posting it. And it really doesn't work anymore. It used to work with sites, Huffington Post, BuzzFeed. A lot of sites really built their business around aggregation. They would just go out and gather articles. Huffington Post had a liberal slant. They would put up their articles that sort of aggregated them. BuzzFeed was, I think, a specialist in putting neat titles on their curations. And that worked. In fact, those sites got pretty big, but they don't do that anymore. These days, there's so much content around, and just having it in one place really isn't of value. I mean, think about it. I want to read the latest news on the NFL. I can go to Google and type in NFL news, and I'll get pages and pages of content, articles and sites and on and on. Or I can go to a site that's a content curation aggregator, and all they've done is pull all those articles together. Well, what's the difference? In either case, I've got a whole list of articles that I'm going to have to wade through myself. And most likely, Google's probably done a better job, ranking them than this content aggregation site does. So that leads us to really the value of content curation, which is spending the time to find meaningful articles in that fire hose of content out there. What is it that your clients would want to read? What is it that, what are some gems that you would be proud to bring to your clients and say, hey, read this, it was meaningful. It's meaningful, it might help your business, or it might help you use our product, something like that. If you're building sites for clients, showing them how to do some simple curation and how to find good articles is a key capability. Some examples. A real estate agency that posts interesting articles on the local community that make people want to live there. Let's say that article of tax law, I've got a real estate site. Everyone's got all the houses on there, and they're all real estate sites. But if I'm posting articles about the latest community pool, what's happening to the schools, the police, what's happening to the police force, the local elections, all of a sudden, people trying to move into this community are going to find my site much more interesting than the ones that just have all the listings, which I can get for a dime a dozen. Think of a real estate listing site as just basically aggregation. As someone mentioned on the chat room here, aggregation is really just posting links to articles in a genre. You can be very narrow, you can be very broad, but it doesn't really add value. Another example, a local pop-up store with articles. You don't want to just start posting articles about every piece of clothes you have on the site. Again, that's just going to overwhelm people. But what if you do little human interest stories about some of the designers, their rags to riches stories? Maybe some of the local community stuff that's happening the weekend your store is going to pop up, so that people say, hey, I'll be down, I might see your store, I might go to this. Again, there's a lot of reasons where just curating articles, interesting things that are going on can help your site. A final one, even if, depending on what your business is, I mean, everyone has all these range of businesses. A garage flooring company is one I worked with, of all things. I mean, what do you do to make your site stand out as a garage flooring company? Well, the person that was using my curator, they gathered articles about horror stories on garage flooring. I don't know if you've ever seen garage floor paint. It's an epoxy-based stuff. You spread it out. It's really sticky. And this guy had articles showing people, like shoes stuck in the epoxy and, brooms stuck on it because they tried to sweep it too soon. Just crazy stuff. And guess what? First of all, his site had articles about garage flooring. He ranked a little better than most of the others in the area. And second of all, people looked at those articles and said, I'm going to call a professional. And guess what site they were looking at, who happened to be a garage flooring professional. So there's, that's really where content curation comes in. So as a question just popped up, what makes it different than just links or scraping? Well, the point is you have to do the work to find articles that matter to your clientele. Just scraping links, gathering a bunch of links together, you're just recreating the fire hose of content on your site. It doesn't do anything. And Google's onto it. They don't really care for aggregation sites anymore. It doesn't help. So let's get started. How do we do all this? Well, first of all, it starts with reading widely in your industry. If you're going to be doing curation, hopefully as a business person, you're reading. You're reading about your industry, your niche, your, competitors to your products, trends, news that impacts your area. You're probably reading a lot of stuff. What you want to do now is keep track of some of the good ones. Maybe you just start bookmarking a few articles. Maybe you paste their links into your notes. But the point is you want to start capturing articles that you think are good for your clients. This is where tools come in handy. My curator basically has tools to let you capture an article and store it into your WordPress site for future curation. You can also find sites that you go to a lot and read, get their RSS feed, gather up their, and gather their articles. My curator will read in the background and take articles that match your criteria and post them to this same sort of curation article space in your dashboard. So you can have articles delivered to you that are helpful and makes it easier to read, for one thing. And number two, you've got articles right there. It's one click, you've created a draft and posted it. We'll show you that a little later as we come in. So basically, the key is to get started. You're doing the reading. Just start thinking, is this an article that my clients would like to see? Is it going to really add value to their day? Next step, what does a curated article look like? Well, this is it. It's simple. Here's a basic, simple curated article. You notice it's not just a scraped link or a bunch of links stuck together. You've got a title. You've got comments. You want to write comments. Basically, you're trying to sell this article to your clients. That's how I think of it. What is it that about this article that my clients want to read it? So write that out. Tell them, this is why you should read it. Then there's second part, a simple excerpt. I look through and try and find the best paragraph or two, few sentences that really makes sense for my clients. What is it that makes this article sing? What is it the thrust of the article about? And then finally, an attribution. You have to attribute the article to the person who wrote it with a link to their site. And we'll talk about the, linking to their site and what that means. But for now, this is a curated article. And you can see that's not going to be hard to do. I could do one of those a week, right? I find a good article, I write a sentence or two, I put in a paragraph, I have the link, boom, I'm done. And in a plugin like My Curator, literally the excerpt and the link come right in with the article. You have the full text to find other paragraphs, and you just type in your sentence or paragraph, publish, you're done. It's easy. So, you know, let's think about this. That's a basic, simple curated article. But if you start doing those, maybe you start popping out one a week, you know, later on, you might say, oh, you know, what am I going to write about this? Well, maybe an overview of how you help your clients, how this article can help. Maybe you start writing a little more and you start putting in an opinion. You know, this is why I think this trend is crazy. You know, don't follow it to your clients. You know, maybe you go a little farther and you say, this article really ties into my product or service. Let me write maybe 2, 3, 4 paragraphs about how, you know, this is how this ancillary product or service might mesh with my product or service. So if you're using this other one, here's a way to link it into mine. You might compare and contrast 2 articles. That's always a simple, great way to get started. You may, even as you get more experience, highlight an issue through many, many related articles. So that's another great way to curate. You know, we'll talk more about the excerpts, but the basic thing is keep them small. You don't want to have too many excerpts. You know, you don't want to really try and reproduce the article. We'll get into that a little more. And always have attribution to the article. You know, don't ever try and pawn it off as yours. Put a link in there. Make the attribution prominent. You know, that's it. That's the basics. If you can start doing this, you can start doing some curation and your site starts growing. Next step, you've built some of those articles, share them. Put them out on your social media. If you're into Twitter, tweet it out a few times. Post a link to it on Facebook or LinkedIn. You know, especially as you write bigger articles, maybe you compare and contrast a couple. Well, maybe you don't want to link to the other 2 on Facebook or Twitter. You link to your site where you're doing the compare and contrast. They can go from your site to read the originals. But now you've got some links to some content on your site. One of the things I like to do is put a weekly email blast together. I curate articles during a monthly email blast. I curate articles every week. I take 2 or 3 of the best, and I blast them out to my email list. You know, it's a great way to, you know, keep in touch with your clients. Another thing is when you're curating articles, you know, you're looking at someone else's site. If they have a lot of good articles, maybe start joining their conversation. Do some commenting. Talk about how that article, you know, you curated it because it fits well with your product. You know, whatever it is, you can start, you know, joining the conversation. Another thing is, and I'll talk about this more, but most people who write articles love it if you curate them well. If you do a simple curation like I showed on the previous slide, they love it. You just brought them a bigger audience. What's not to love? I got a question here about curated content compared to the original content in regard to SEO. We're going to go over that in a whole section. But basically, those simple curated posts with just a sentence or 2 and an excerpt, they aren't going to do a whole lot for your SEO. But as you get more complex and start curating multiple articles together or start writing a little more, guess what? You're writing really original content. So we'll get to that a little more in the next few slides. Here's a good one. I always get this question. Is content curation legal? Can I actually put stuff on my site that I didn't write? You know, there actually is no specific law about it, and we'll go over the interpretation, but it's disruptive. Look what it's done to the news, you know, the rise of people like Huffington Post and BuzzFeed. You know, they were able to build businesses based on curating articles and adding their own content. And sure enough, all of a sudden they were a media outlet. You know, Facebook's going the same way. They're curating articles and they're posting them to their clients. You know, it's disruptive. It's changing the world. Apple News, another one. You know, you can go on and see all these articles. So is all that legal? Well, the legal clause is fair use. If done well, it's going to benefit the publisher as well as the curator. So what is fair use? The way I think of it is it's basically common sense. You know, if you copy the whole article onto your site with no link back to the original, you've just told your clients, you've just tried to make your clients believe you wrote it. That's not fair use, right? It's pretty common sense. even if you copied 4 or 5 of the paragraphs, you're trying to basically get the clients to stay and read the gist of the article on your site and not getting them over to the site where it came from. So I don't really think that's fair use either. I think what you really need to do is, to be fair, is to say, this is a great article. Here's why it's a great article. Go read it. That's fair use, right? If you don't write your own commentary, if you're just posting quotes from an article and a link back to it, at least you've got the link. That's good. But if you haven't done any commentary, then you haven't really told your readers why this is a good article. And if you're just sort of automating that, where you post the first 40 words of every article in a link, what's that doing? How's that helping your clients? And also, it's starting to, I just don't really think of that as good a fair use as writing your own comments. All right, there's a quick question. I'll jump back. How to find good articles? Basically, yes. Don't curate from your competitors. Sometimes some competitors, like I've used articles from some of my competitors because they're very broad-based. They talk about curation. They mention a competitor, but their competitor is in a different niche than me. They're handling big clients. I'm handling little clients. So, I can curate from them. They're doing good work. They've actually had a big team of people writing articles. And I know I'm not really going to compete with them, and they aren't going to compete with me. Their product costs, 100 times more than mine. So, and we'll get into that a little more later about how you should check on articles. All right, so fair use, as I mentioned before, most authors are actually happy to have your article curated well. If you do fair use and you provide you're selling their article, you've got the links, boy, they're happy. I get comments all the time from people who I've curated their articles because of the pingbacks with WordPress. They know I curated it, and they come to me and say, great, thanks. Wonderful that you curated that article. And guess what? Now I've started a dialogue with someone. I've got someone, a real life person, another blog who maybe is a great writer. And I can go and say, hey, how about, I curate other articles of yours, or maybe you'll even write one for me. Maybe later on when I curate a bigger piece, they'll publish it on their site. Think about that. That's a wonderful part of curation. The excerpt. Again, I mentioned the excerpt. You don't want to copy the article. You don't want to use a lot of it. I'm going to go through a lot of these points over and over. Read the article. I mean, that's the key. Read the article and then find the key points that make sense. Like in this article that I have on the slide, notice I've used 3 paragraphs from there. What I try and do is have at least as much of my own writing as they took from the article. The number of words there are actually pretty close. And that's good discipline. What it does is sort of force you to think about, if this article is so good, I want to excerpt several pieces, then I want to write more about the article itself. What does it mean? Why do I think it's good for my clients? Or how does it help them, or whatever? So a way to think about excerpts is, you're trying to sell the article with their excerpts. What is it that makes that article sing? Find the best part, get it up on your site, and tell your clients why to go there. If you don't do this well, if you don't do attribution, if you copy too much, Google will take you out of the search rankings. I've had clients who copy articles, who copy big chunks of articles, who don't attribute articles, who don't put comments. They get pulled out of the Google search rankings after a while. Because Google knows where that article was in the beginning. They've been indexing every page on the web. They know that this article showed up, 2 days before it showed up on your site. So guess who the original is? So you can't really try and fool them. So how to make attribution clear. There's sometimes not enough blame to go around, but there's always enough attribution to go around. And for that question, I just came in, how do you identify sources? We will get over that in a bit. But fundamentally it is, if you find yourself reading articles at different sites, that's a great source. The others are Google alerts. There's various news feeds, even Twitter searches. You can search content curation on Twitter and get a whole bunch of tweets that have articles embedded. So anyway, we'll get to that in a bit. So attribution. Make sure you have attribution on every article you post, even if it's just a couple sentences. Make attribution. It's simple, it's easy. Be prominent, don't hide it somewhere. Don't use no follow links, it's like being stingy, you aren't going to send them any link juice, but you're going to use their article. That's just, it's stingy. Don't do it. I also like to mention the author, and if they have an author page on the site, I'll link to that too. Might as well get a couple links to their site. The author likes it, especially if it's a site where, multiple authors contribute. You've sort of singled out this author as a good one. And maybe some of their other articles are also good. So if your clients follow the link, they say, oh, I like these articles. Don't curate from sites you don't like. I always visit every article before I curate it. Even though my curator, the plugin, will pull articles in, I can see the full text. I always like to go and visit the site first. Is it a competitor? You don't want to curate their article. Is it, if I go there, do like 20 pop-ups show up? Well, I don't want to send my clients to that site. Do I get a Google warning if I go to the site? I'm not going to send my clients there. So make sure you visit the site before you put an attribution link in. You don't want to send your clients somewhere that you don't want to go. One of the hardest parts about attribution is images. You may curate an article that has some images. That image itself may have been curated multiple times. Images seem to travel around the web even more often than content. What I look for is, well, first of all, you want to just curate small little pieces of, you basically just want to curate thumbnails or small pieces of the image. Don't take a full page image. That's like taking a full article. It's very rich, detailed, it looks wonderful, but you're curating. Get the thumbnail. You can use Google image search. You type in the URL of the image and Google amazingly finds all these other sites that use the image. I've seen some images used by pages and pages of sites. A lot of times you can tell quickly where the original image was from. If you can't, I sort of look through and find the biggest image. Whoever made the image most likely had it made big. And the biggest image is probably the person who owns the image. These days, because images are flying around the web and it's hard to tell who owns what and where it started, I would consider using your own images. I use sites like Pexels, PEXELS.com and Pixabay.com. They have free unlimited pictures. You can download as many as you want. You can use them all you want. You don't have to worry about copyright. You don't have to worry about attribution. You can just put them up. And I found that's a great way to deal with images. So with attribution, this is a good place to talk about the fact that I'm sending someone to another site with that link. You think, oh no, I just lost them. Well, first of all, it's reasonable to have that link open up in a new tab on a browser. That's reasonable. Now they can see the whole site. They'll look at the site. Will they ever come back? Well, most likely, as long as you haven't, curated from a direct competitor, they'll look at that article, they'll like it, they'll remember where they saw it. The other articles on the site probably aren't even germane to them. If you've got a small business about garage flooring and someone happened to write an interesting article about it, but normally they write about cats, well, the person probably isn't going to look there, but that article was great. If you're curating them out well, they're going to remember where they went to find the best articles. Because remember, what you did was save them from having to look through all those sites in the first place. So the fact that you send them to a site to look at an article and they say, yeah, I like that, guess what? They just kill that tab and they're right back at your site. So, don't get hung up on the fact that, I'm sending people to another site. It's the way of the web. If it's a good article, it's worth them to read it. The person that you curated from gets the page hits and if they're doing some advertising, they get from advertising, whatever. But also you've already got page hits and advertising. And when they come back to see if you have new articles, you get some more. So that's basically it on legality. To recap, we've talked about curation, what it is, how it works, the simpleness of it. We've talked about the legal issues. It is legal if you do fair use. So, now we want to say, okay, I'm sold. Content curation looks pretty easy. It's legal. How's it actually going to help me? And we had a question about that earlier. This section, we're going to talk about how. A question about sniped images. Yeah, I just was talking about that. You can use Google image search to see if it came from somewhere else. And like I said, more and more because of the way images, if you're curating what turns out to be a stock image from Getty Image, guess what? It's a problem. And as someone mentioned, and I did, Pexels and Pixabay, these are places that have images and they're safe to use. So I would just go there most of the time. So, as someone said, the image companies seem to be the most voracious, and just, be very careful with images. All right, content curation. How's it going to increase my rankings? Well, content is king, and curation is a way to start building content. Second of all, it's flexible. You can usually find a style that suits you. Maybe you find you do a lot of compare and contrast of two articles. Maybe you like to pull together a bunch of articles and talk about a trend. Maybe you just like to do those simple curations for a while and eventually start doing a little bit more writing about each article. It's flexible. But the big thing it does is your site is vibrant. Even if you're just doing simple curation, you've got you've got some content showing up regularly. A search engine, if Google goes to a site and it has the exact same pages that it did 6 months ago, guess what? It's going to fall down on the ranking. If you've got a bunch of simple curations like we started with, just a comment, an excerpt, and a link, guess what? Your site is different than it was 6 months ago. So Google's not going to penalize you for not doing anything. So in that sense, it's going to help you keep your SEO where it is. The other thing it does is your site is going to look a little more deeper and authoritative. Those little paragraphs and sentences, they add up. If you curate once a week, you've actually written a fair amount of stuff. You've got several thousands of words on there now on your site. Google's going to notice. And guess what? A lot of those sites, if you're using like a Yoast SEO or something and you're focusing on getting the right keywords on what you write, guess what? You're starting to get some keywords on your site. And even those excerpts, if you have an excerpt that's using a few keywords, even though Google knows that the excerpt came from someone else, it does look at the excerpt and say, hey, this site seems to have a lot of information about this keyword. The other thing it does is you've got probably some long tail keywords. You're bringing in articles, writing a little bit, even those small excerpts and small paragraphs, you're mentioning things. Let's say you're a tax lawyer, but you pull in a bunch of articles on real estate tax law. Well, guess what? Your site is now a little broader, has long tail hits on things like real estate tax law. You might have mentioned it once in your bio page on your site, but if you've got 6 articles about it, that's a reasonable, that's a site that has something to say about real estate tax law. If you're promoting your content through social media with Twitter, Facebook, stuff like that, again, Google says, whoa, this site is not only changing day by day or week by week or month by month, but there's some social media activity around it too. So that's going to help. If you've been commenting and maybe posting some of those articles in other sites, like you did a compare and contrast piece and had it and posted a link to it on some other sites where you've curated before, you've got some backlinks. So even with some fairly simple content curation, you're starting to get your site noticed a little bit. You've also built up, maybe more importantly, in your client's mind, some authority. You're showing your clients that you're keeping up with the trends, that you know about what's going on in the industry. Maybe that's even more important than SEO, especially if you've got a good active email and client outreach program. The fact that you're bringing them back and there's some for them to see could be invaluable, even more invaluable than SEO. For instance, you're top of mind. Someone reads an article, they share it with their friends, they found it on your site, they read another one a week later, a month later, and then someone says, hey, we need to get a product that does X. And they say, oh, yeah, these guys I just remember an article. They're coming out with a new product that does that. You're top of mind. So those are all some of the basic benefits of even just simple content curation. I just got a question about good idea to make your keyword topic high level. You should definitely be aware of your keywords and what it is, that you want to be noticed for, and make sure, you mention them in your little excerpt, the little comments you write. If you can get an excerpt that mentions it, as well as the thrust of the article, that's great too. It's a great idea to have, some content curation there. So the next step, curated articles can actually become top ranked. The article I've circled, I wrote an article in 2013 on Is Content Curation Legal, was the title. I basically curated about 5 or 6 different articles. I went around, my curator was picking up articles about legality. I was saving them in a feature we have on my curator called a notebook, where I could keep track of articles for future use. I read through those articles. Some were scholarly legal things, some were trendy things, some were, common sense articles. And I wrote an article, my own article, basically sort of like a journalist. I said, here's the legal basis for this. Here's an article to read about more. Here's the trends going on. Here's an article to read about more. And then by the end of it, I'd written enough, and I basically put my opinions. This is why I think it's legal. This is what you need to do to stay legal. This is what you need to do, not do. So it was my own article. Guess what? It ranks higher than pretty much every single one of the sources that I used. And it has been on the top page of Google. If you type in, is content curation legal? It's up on the top page more often than not since 2013. So curated articles, even though they aren't, a 2,000 word original article, can be very high level SEO generators. Again, it's not that I didn't create something of value there. I went and pulled together a bunch of things. In fact, the reason my article ranks higher than most of the sources is because I cover the topic a little more broadly than most of the sources did. So again, if Google's answering the question, is content curation legal? It says, oh, here's a really scholarly site. And this one talks about, legal on Twitter, but this one seems to have a broad view. Let me put it up there too. So that's something you should, realize, that as you get a little better, you do those simple little curations, then you start growing and growing. Guess what? You can have an article that ranks highly. My analytics, I usually have people hitting this landing page in my top 10 or 20 analytics pages every week. So, it just pays benefits over and over. Oh, and someone just said it doesn't come up anymore. I haven't looked lately. Too bad. It sort of pops up and down. All right. And then this is what I think is the real benefit of curation. Curation is like a writing course. I'm a busy executive. When I first started my plugin, I thought I'd just put on the repository and wait for people to show up. And I put my site up. I started doing my curations, and I did those simple curations for literally months. I didn't do any more than that. Then I just started writing a little more comments, some more overviews. The comments started growing into paragraphs at a time. Sometimes, a 2-sentence analysis of an article became several paragraphs. And then I started to gain a voice. I began writing pieces based on several articles. So I started injecting my own opinion, my own ideas. And I started, feeling comfortable sitting down with a few curated articles and writing, 500, maybe even 1,000 words all at once. With that practice came some confidence and the ability to start creating your own posts and articles. I had a voice. I came up with, my feeling was that Curation helped you become a writer, even though you had a busy business. And I wrote an article about it. And I posted it on Yahoo Small Business, Business to Community, places like that. Some of the places I'd curated from, they posted it. So all of a sudden, I'm starting to write out my own thoughts and ideas, just because of the habit of posting a little bit at a time to start with. So I just started building more and more content, how-tos, compare and contrast, your thoughts on new trends, new ways of using your products. All of that stuff is great. And once you've sort of gotten into that practice of curating something every week, every other week, it just starts coming naturally. It just becomes easier and easier, and as I built those longer pieces, longer curated articles are good. They're really your own creation. They're more like a journalist, right? A journalist always quotes their sources and then they have a conclusion. Well, that's what you're doing with Curation. The longer curation pieces are, real creations. So publish them as such, post them to your social medium as such. And that's where I see the real power of content curation is, as everyone says, if you could write a bunch of 2,000 word articles every week, you'd be in heaven. If you could write one complex curated article a month, that's great. And maybe one 2,000 word article every 6 months, and then you just keep up with the simple curations as you go, and maybe 2 article compares and contrasts. So that's the point, is you're just starting to build this universe of content. It's flexible. Some days I have 0 time. I curate one of those simple, paragraph excerpt link. Another day I found 2 articles and I do a compare and contrast. A month later, all of a sudden I pull together 5 articles that I've been saving aside and I do those. So that's where I see the real benefit coming in. A question about schema data to help Google on curated content. I haven't looked into that. That's an interesting idea. I hadn't actually even thought about it. That's something to look into. I don't know if anyone online has some ideas about it. That would be great. So start with what you know and use Curation to build your writing skills. Create a regular content schedule of some curated writings, more complex curated writings. Maybe you start throwing in some original writing around curated pieces. Maybe you even do your own whole article from scratch. Promote them and you'll get found. It really is a way to just build up your site. So with that, that's the end of the presentation. Any other comments? What I'm going to do is go to My Curator, and My Curator is a plugin basically that helps you do all of this. It's available on the WordPress repository as My Curator. You can visit our site. It's www.targetinfo.com, target-info.com. You'll see all the information about it. We have a free individual plan where if you're like a simple business or a blogger and you really only talk about one concept or one category of information, it's free. We have some $15 and $30 monthly subscriptions, which let you do more and more curation. They all have a free trial. And for those of you who are on the webinar, we'll extend that trial for another month. Just choose Other on the Where Did You Find Us dropdown. So that's the information about My Curator. What I'm going to do is go and do a quick demo of My Curator here. We got some time. And again, if you have any questions as we go, throw them up on the chat room and we'll question them. So this is sort of the back end of your site, your dashboard. My Curator makes an area called Training Posts. I'll get into why it's called Training. And guess what? It just has all these articles it's found on the web. And it brings them in throughout the day. It's a background process. we use a cloud service to pull the full text of every article. I can click on a title, I can click on a title, and I've got the pictures and the full text right there. So it's easy to review an article right on the My Curator site. I can look at the titles, scroll through. Now, content comes, even if you have just a few sources, and we'll get to that in a minute, content comes at you like a fire hose. So what My Curator has is a simple machine learning AI technique. These little green thumbs up and red thumbs down let me say, I like this article or I don't. So this one I'm going to say I like. I can click the green thumbs up. And over here under class, it's good. Let's say I don't like this one. I click on the red thumbs down. It takes it away and it marked it as bad. It's remembering all of these clicks on the green and red thumbs over time. And eventually, under this class thing over here, every article is going to come in. You can see good, not sure, good, bad. Every article is marked as a class. And I can say, just show me all the good articles and filter. And I'm just going to get only the good articles. That's going to be what I found with My Curator. If you train, say, about 20 articles, roughly half good and half bad, you will end up getting rid of probably somewhere between 75 and 90% of the articles are just going to be, you know, classified as bad or not sure. And you can focus on the good ones. So it's sort of like Pandora. You know how you just click, I like this song, I don't like that song. It gets better and better. So does My Curator, and it's doing it with articles. Once I've got these articles, I can say, okay, here's a good article. It's content curation, good for SEO. 11 examples. I like that. I can click Make Live. Remember, we're in a separate holding area for articles. When I click Make Live, it pops up another window into my WordPress, and I'm right in the WordPress editor. Go into the Visual tab, and you'll see, here's my quote. Here's my link already built in. It grabbed the picture and put it into the featured image for me. Now I can go ahead and change that if I don't trust where this came from, as we've been talking about. And down below, look at this. This is the whole original article. So what I'm going to do is go up here. I don't want just the top 40 words or whatever that come in on that article. I highlight it. As I scroll through, you'll see it highlights in yellow each paragraph. I see a paragraph I like, I just click, and it's copied it up into the editor right here. So I can click copy my excerpts right out of the article into the editor. Then I go up to the top and I write my own content. You know, this is a great article, and on and on. I'm not going to sit here and bore you with all this typing. That's not going to be a quote, but notice I always use WordPress quotes. If the excerpts come in as quoted, that's, you know, a great way to say, you know, does this, this is the quote from the article. Question, can I find material in other languages? Yes, it actually works in every languages that are standard web languages. The My Curator training and documentation I haven't got around to translating, but the actual articles, it will find articles in German or Chinese or Sanskrit or whatever you've got. And you can type in, as we'll see later, our topics that help find articles. The training also works. So it works. I've got clients all over the world publishing in languages that, you know, when I go to help them with their site, I have no idea what it says. Luckily, there's Google Translate. Okay, so basically, I'm going to get to this next question right now. Thank you for leading me in there. So that's basically it. I can publish that article. Boom. I created that simple little curation, you know, my comment, the excerpt, and the original. And most of that was already popped in here for me. So I'm going to come out of there, go back to my training posts, come down to the My Curator menu item. Remember, I told you it's processing in the background. This tells you when it's going to run again and how many articles it's found. We're going to go to topics. The way you set up, well, let's start, actually, we're going to answer the topic question. We're going to go to sources. I'm going to go to edit sources. these are a list of sources. My Curator works on you finding your own sources. Let's say I find an article. Here's an article. I have a tool called Source It. I can click on it. It's a little bookmark that I dragged up here from My Curator. It pops up. It finds the actual RSS feed on that site, and it's going to post it to my site. I can tell it to put it in the link category Curation. I can add a new category. Boom, I can save that source. So that's what you're going to be doing with My Curator. First step is finding sites you like, getting their RSS feeds. The other great sources are Google Alerts at alerts.google.com. You can, if you have a Gmail account, you can create basically a search like content curation that's always running, and Google will supply it as an RSS feed, and our Source It tool can grab that RSS feed. Twitter, we do the same thing. If you come back to My Curator, the news and Twitter feed, I can create a Twitter search field. I can type in content curation, and we will use Twitter. You have to have your own Twitter account, and there's some ways you have to set it up. But basically, we'll start getting a bunch of tweets on content curation. A lot of tweets have that little link, t.co, a little link to an article. We grab that link, we send it to our cloud, it pulls out the article and sends it back to us. So we've curated articles right out of Twitter. We can also do Google News feeds. So all those sources are telling My Curator what to read. The next step, as I mentioned before, is, okay, I got all this stuff coming in. Well, what do I look for? In that case, you want to set up a topic. And this is where you tell it, these are the types of articles I want. I want articles on curation. Notice I put curate without an E or an ION. I'm using the root. It'll match any word, curation, curates, curation, curator. This word has to be in every article that I keep. If it's not there, I'm going to reject it. Topic search too. These are all the words that one of these words has to be in all of the article. I could leave the top one blank. I'll get all the articles through the first screen, and then it has to have one of these words in it. If I quote them, then it has to have the word just as written, content aggregation. So this is telling My Curator, I'm looking through all those feeds, which articles do I pull out that make some sense to me? I can exclude articles. I can tell it the minimum article length. I don't want it too short. Otherwise, you get all these tiny little articles that are worthless. I want big 200-word articles. I can tell it skip these domains. These are my competitors. Don't go there. Don't even bring me the articles. I don't want to see them. And then I choose which source, curation or curation video, I'm going to be reading for those articles. So basically, what you've done is you've had a set of sources for My Curator, and the article then tell it the topics and tell it what to look for. So let's look at some questions. There is a way to select topics you want to curate. That's the topic page. What happens when you uninstall the plugin? Actually, all of our posts, as soon as you make live a post out of that training posts area, those articles are yours. They're in WordPress. We make a standard WordPress article. We have no hooks or fingers or hidden stuff in it. It's published. So if you uninstall My Curator, all your published articles are still there. Nothing changes. You won't have that little training post menu item anymore, so you won't be getting new curated articles. But everything you've done is yours. It's done. We're complete on the back end. Another thing that's relevant to that is every article that's published is a regular WordPress post, so it follows your theme. We don't do any formatting. In that WordPress editor, we have this information, but your theme is going to format that, not us. So however you do block quotes, that's how it does it. We try and be a complete back-end processor, just providing articles to you as time goes on. Finally, notebooks. Glad we got that question. I almost forgot. Notebooks, remember we have the training post menu item that have all of those articles that are showing up day in and day out. Well, sometimes I want to keep track of an article, but I don't want to publish it. I don't want to make it live or even put it in drafts. With notebooks, I can create a notebook, marketing articles. And I can save those articles right in here. They just remember the that's the full text of an article that I saved into this notebook. This notebook has a whole bunch of articles in it. If I go into that post I was writing, I can choose a notebook, marketing articles. I'm going to save the draft again, and that way it pulls in more articles. And now when I look down here, look at this. I have a table of contents of all those articles pulled into this meta box. I go look at article 11. I can grab a paragraph right from that article. Then I can go to article, I go back to the index and say, oh yeah, content creation at next level, article 8. I'm going to grab a paragraph from that. So remember where I did that, is content curation legal? Well, that's how I did it. I saved articles to my notebook on legality of content curation. Then when it came time to do a post, I brought them all into my meta box. I started writing, I started copying excerpts. I can even copy the link in by just clicking there. It puts the link right into my article. So let's say I go down here. I can grab a paragraph, and then I can grab that link, and boom. Now I've got that paragraph and link down below. So it's a great way to be able to put together those long curated articles without, having to go to all these websites and cut and paste stuff and try and keep track of it all and gather every URL. They're all right here for you. And I think that's the real beauty of My Curator is we've pulled everything you need to do for curation together. All the basics are there. We can handle multi-authors. We can handle those training posts. You can do bulk curations where you post a bunch of things to draft and work through them. So basically, you've got a whole content curation platform that sits in the background, finding you content throughout the day that you can publish to your site.